Everyone, I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. Canada's capital city has declared a state of emergency, saying protests against COVID restrictions are posing a threat to public safety. The demonstration started more than a week ago when thousands of long-haul truckers went to Ottawa to protest a requirement that they be vaccinated to cross into the United States. Authorities say at least 500 trucks are still refusing to leave. A Navy SEAL candidate has died and another is hospitalized after going through what's known as Hell Week. 24-year-old Kyle Mullen got sick after completing the grueling 120 hours of training and later died at the hospital. Mullen's cause of death is now under investigation. The other hospitalized candidate is said to be in stable condition. And the trial of 3 former police officers charged in the death of George Floyd resumes today after proceedings paused due to one of the defendants testing positive for COVID-19. J. Alexander King, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao are charged with violating Floyd's rights by not providing medical aid. And fans are celebrating the life of Lata Mangeshkar, one of the biggest singing stars in the history of Bollywood, who died at 92 after being hospitalized with pneumonia and COVID-19. Mangeshkar recorded songs for over 2,000 films that actresses would then lip-sync to on screen. She was also a composer and a music director. Flags across India are being flown at half-staff in her honor. And Russia is moving more forces even closer to the Ukraine border. President Biden's national security advisor warns that Vladimir Putin is in a position to, quote, act aggressively against Ukraine at any time. But high-level diplomacy is also underway. French President Emmanuel Macron is meeting with Putin, hoping to avoid a new European war. Senior national correspondent Terry Moran has the latest from Ukraine.
French President Emmanuel Macron arrived in Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin as Russia mobilizes more troops even closer to Ukraine's border. Macron telling reporters before leaving Paris it's essential to stop the situation deteriorating. U.S. officials estimate that Russia now has in place 70% of the forces needed for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Satellite images show Moscow's military massing in neighboring Belarus. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan warning that there is a, quote, very distinct possibility that Putin will order an attack on Ukraine.
It could take a number of different forms. It could happen as soon as tomorrow, or it could take some weeks yet. He has put himself in a position with military deployments to be able to act aggressively against Ukraine at any time now.
But intelligence agencies in the U.S. and NATO allies assess that Putin has not made a final decision on an invasion, and Russia denies any intention to attack. The Russian military released video showing drills alongside troops from Belarus, which they say are part of scheduled war games, including tanks and heavy mobile missile launchers, and even long-range nuclear-capable bombers flying over Belarus. And in the Black Sea, Russia has up to 30 ships at the ready, including 5 amphibious assault ships that could be used for beach landing. For years, Vladimir Putin has poured money into the Russian military, which was once crumbling, seeking to reassert Russian dominance in the region.
This is a military that's backed by a lot of firepower, a lot of air power, naval power. The Russian Navy is gathering in the Mediterranean. It's very different from sort of the past remembrances of poor Russian military performance in the 90s.
Over the weekend, U.S. troops arrived in Eastern Europe to reinforce NATO, and more U.S. military equipment arrived in Ukraine as the window for diplomacy narrows. Ukrainians we've spoken with here, they don't share the same dire assessment of the situation that the Pentagon has. They've lived with Russian threats and aggression for years. In fact, in the eastern part of this country, there is a grinding war going on that has killed more than 14,000 people since 2014, a war with Russian-backed, Russian-armed separatists. They know that, and they have a painful personal understanding that a full-scale war would be much, much worse. Diane?
All right, Terry Moran in Kiev, Ukraine. Thanks, Terry. And let's bring in ABC News national security and defense analyst Mick Mulroy for more on this. Mick, thanks for being here. How provocative are these war games that Russia is staging with its allies in Belarus?
So very provocative, Diane. I think, as Terry reported, we're about 70% to the point of having enough forces for a full-on invasion. They're looking at opening multiple points and multiple avenues of approach, which includes now amphibious assaults, which would cause even more dilemma for the Ukrainians in trying to oppose the invasion. I think we're at a very dangerous stage with getting close to a military capability of readiness to invade. We have 83 what they call battalion tactical groups. That's how Russia fights, available now, and 14 on the way. So militarily, they're almost ready. Whether they're politically ready is another question.
So based on what you've seen in terms of the troops and the equipment that are staged on the border, what do you think a potential Russian invasion could look like?
So I think they're looking at either a limited invasion, largely into the Russian-speaking eastern side of the country, which would have a lot of consequences, negative consequences to both sides, or a full-scale invasion, which would have massive consequences. As the Intelligence Committee reported this week, that could include 50,000 civilian casualties, 25,000 Ukrainian military casualties, and up to 5 million refugees pouring into neighboring countries, including NATO countries. So this could be extensive. It could cause an extensive amount of human deaths, and the occupation would be incredibly intense, as Ukrainians are very much ready to fight, and the United States has provided them a lot of the capabilities to fight, both to oppose an invasion and to create a significant insurgency after one occurs.
Now, how much of a deterrent are the U.S. troops that are being deployed to neighboring countries?
So I think we should look at that primarily to bolster the security of our NATO allies. However, if you look at after the occupation, when the insurgency starts, in order for insurgencies to be successful, they have to have a safe haven. The most likely safe haven for Ukrainians is going to be in Poland. They have a large ethnic Ukrainian population, and of course, all the refugees from Ukraine which will be there, which will allow them to hide. So you'll have an insurgency out of a NATO country fighting back into their own country. This, as the Ukrainian president has pointed out, will rapidly turn into a war that is beyond the borders of Ukraine and includes NATO countries. So having the U.S. forces there bolsters their security and prepares for this eventuality in the spillover of this war in Ukraine, should it occur. We should all hope that it does not. We should all hope that the diplomatic efforts today happening in multiple capitals are successful.
And there are several high-level diplomatic meetings going on today, including a one-on-one with Vladimir Putin and French President Emmanuel Macron. So how much longer do you think this whole thing can go on for before we either see a resolution or an invasion?
So I think this is essentially a crisis of Russia's own making, and it is a crisis they could end. If they think that this somehow bolsters their standing on the world stage, to have everybody talking about them, having multiple phone calls with the U.S. presidents and having visits to Moscow, then perhaps this keeps going. It does have dire consequences for Russia should they decide to actually invade. They will be successful probably in their occupation, but the intensity of the insurgency I cannot overstate. And the fact that this could spill over could cause great economic hardship to Russia, isolation, and just further damage to the Russian reputation. So let's hope that we can find another way out of this other than an actual conflict.
All right, Mick Mulroy, always great to have your analysis, Mick. Thank you.
Thank you.
And three-time Olympian Chinese tennis champion Peng Shuai was among the spectators at the Beijing Games. Peng sparked international concern for her well-being after making apparent sexual assault allegations against a Chinese official in November and then largely disappearing from public view. But she now claims it was all a misunderstanding. Marcus Moore is in Beijing with the latest.
For months, speculation swirled about the safety of Chinese tennis champion Peng Shuai, who seemingly disappeared from the public eye after accusing a former Chinese official of sexual misconduct. The three-time Olympian denying she ever made accusations of sexual assault to a French paper in a, quote, controlled interview, answering pre-submitted questions in front of a Chinese Olympic official. In the interview, Shuai expressed thanks for the concern towards her, but added that her initial allegations were a big misunderstanding, telling L'Equipe, quote, I would like to know why such concern. I never said anyone sexually assaulted me. The IOC announcing they met with her for dinner on Saturday and later attended a curling match.
We, as a sports organisation, are doing everything to ensure that she is happy, and I don't think it's up for us to be able to judge in one way, just as it's not for you to judge either in one way or another.
Why was the meeting not disclosed over the weekend?
We released it when we thought it was the right time. I mean, obviously, we are not doing this for the media cycle. We are doing it because we want to keep people informed, and we're doing it because we want to support her.
All right, Marcus Moore, thanks for that report. Coming up, it is National Black HIV and AIDS Awareness Day, a disease which impacts Black Americans at a much higher rate than others. We'll tell you why and what's being done to expand care for communities of color right after this. Welcome back. Today is National Black HIV and AIDS Awareness Day, which started as a grassroots movement to raise awareness of prevention, care, and treatment options in communities of color. Now, while anyone can get HIV, Black Americans are disproportionately affected. The CDC reports that while Black people account for 13% of the U.S. population, they made up 40% of people with HIV in 2019. On average, 1 in 16 Black men and 1 in 30 Black women will be diagnosed with HIV at some point in their lifetime. So let's bring in founder of the Black AIDS Institute, Phil Wilson, for more on this. Phil, thanks for being here. You know, CDC data shows that over the past decade, new infections have dropped among white, gay, and bisexual men, but remained flat among those who are Black, Hispanic, or Latino. Why are we seeing these higher rates to begin with? And then why aren't we seeing these numbers come down in these communities?
Well, thank you for having me, Diane. And, you know, the CDC recently released a report showing that Black people are disproportionately impacted by HIV on every level. We get infected at higher rates, as you just reported. We get sicker faster, we die faster. Interesting, you know, that's a report that has been released every year for the last 40 years. Now, so Black people have been disproportionately impacted by HIV since the beginning of the epidemic. It's kind of like Groundhog Day every February where we release this information. There are a number of fundamental issues that continue to exist. Now, high rates of poverty, now housing instability, the issue around discrimination, and a distrust of both the healthcare system and systems in general in the United States as Black people feel mistreated and facing all sorts of challenges.
Now, throughout the pandemic, we've heard a lot about the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on communities of color. Is there a common thread here?
Yes, I think that there certainly is a common thread. You know, one would have hoped that we would have learned lessons from HIV and AIDS, and clearly we have, but we have not learned them well enough. For many of us in Black communities, we feel like it's deja vu. We feel like, you know, the same processes that we experienced in the HIV pandemic, we're experiencing in COVID-19. And now we're facing the dual epidemics. You know, what we see is that Black people who are living with HIV, or people in general living with HIV, disproportionately, those people are Black, also face higher incidences of COVID-19. The severity of the disease with COVID-19 is greater for people who are living with HIV as well.
And so is there sort of one key area that needs to be focused on, you know, access to medication and healthcare, for example? What do you think is sort of one key place that communities and that leaders can focus on to try to at least get this going in the right direction?
Well, I think that we've been plagued with kind of fits and starts. And so if we want to have success in addressing the disproportionate impact that HIV and AIDS and now COVID-19 is having on Black communities, we have to have an all-out effort that is sustained and consistent over time. And that's not happened. No, we launch initiatives, and then those initiatives drop off, and then we launch new initiatives, and then those initiatives drop off. And so if we want to be serious about fighting both HIV and COVID-19 in Black communities, number one, we have to have an all-out effort. We have to be consistent about that effort. We have to engage the entirety of Black communities, inclusive of the LGBTQI communities, but inclusive of traditional institutions as well. We need to reinvigorate our energy to remind people, although we have had success with HIV and AIDS, the pandemic is not over. Now is not the time to lift our foot off the gas. Quite frankly, now is the time to press our foot onto the gas in a wholehearted, holistic manner.
And so what should people do to stay safe?
Well, number one, there are obviously advances we've made in treatment and prevention. Today, if you're diagnosed with HIV, science will allow you to live, quite frankly, a normal lifespan. Now, today, if you're diagnosed with HIV, there are treatments that actually can stop the progress of the disease in your body. On the prevention side, we have tools like U equals U, which means that if you're undetectable, you cannot transmit the virus. So both the treatment is a prevention tool so that we don't transmit the virus to others. We also have PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, which allows people to protect themselves from acquisition of the disease. Now, we also need to face the issues around community activity and access to the disease, because although these treatments are available, the uptake is not the same in Black and brown and other people of color communities and in poor communities as they are in wealthy communities and white communities.
All right, Phil Wilson, great to have you, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you.
And coming up, could one state have the blueprint for fairer elections? Our in-depth look into the contentious fight over redistricting when we come back. Welcome back. A new Michigan commission is trying to redesign the way political maps are drawn, giving the task to a group of everyday citizens rather than politicians. The goal is to make elections more fair. But now the group is defending the new maps against criticism and even lawsuits. So is it a new way forward or a failed experiment? ABC's Devin Dwyer has the details.
In battleground Michigan, 32-year-old Katie Fahey is tired of our ugly politics.
I hate the red versus blue, all of that.
And after she says they fractured her family and others, she aired her frustration on Facebook in 2016.
I'd like to take on gerrymandering in Michigan. If you're interested in doing this as well, please let me know. Smiley face. I just couldn't keep going to work every single day feeling like nobody was taking seriously how frustrated families across our state felt.
Hundreds of thousands of her Michigan neighbors signed up to help her, forming a grassroots movement to end gerrymandering or allowing politicians to draw the state's political districts to benefit one political party.
Michigan's a super purple state. About 50% of us vote for Democrats, about 50% of us vote for Republicans. But depending on what party had gerrymandered, that party would have like a super majority and be able to pass whatever kind of legislation they want, even though theoretically we should have compromise on almost every single bill we were passing.
Fahey's campaign to level the playing field defied the odds, successfully amending the state constitution to create an independent citizens commission to draw new and fairer maps after the 2020 census. Last month, the commission delivered its finished product.
What do you think of the commission's maps?
It means that we'll have more competitive elections. It means that we'll probably have some more moderate candidates, too, who are actually listening to both Democrats and Republicans.
Michigan's old political maps have historically been some of the most unfair and unbalanced, drawn by Republicans to favor Republicans, with just 2 competitive congressional districts seen here in yellow. 538's redistricting tracker now says Michigan's new maps are cleaner, fairer, and more competitive for both parties.
Why is it being called one of the fairest maps in the country?
The map just does a really good job of kind of making sure that neither Democrats nor Republicans' votes are wasted.
It was also a big sense of relief.
Rebecca Zatella is a lawyer, mother of 4, and political independent who volunteered to chair the commission of 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 4 independents that drew new district lines together.
I think we did a very good job of sort of putting our individual feelings on the shelf and making sure we were doing what was best for the people of Michigan. I think that the maps should be fair and balanced moving forward. I think that people will feel once again that their vote is their voice and that they have the ability to elect someone that represents them.
But advocates in both parties are crying foul. State Republicans suing in federal court allege the new political districts aren't of equal population size and illegally split up some cities and counties. Some Democrats around Detroit have also filed suit, alleging the maps dilute the power of black voters in violation of the Voting Rights Act.
There are no majority black districts.
It's hurting the ability of black candidates as well as hurting African Americans to have people that will represent the interests that needs to be represented on their behalf. 51% or better is what the Voting Rights Act says. So if we don't do that, then we are doing a disservice to the African American population.
While the old maps had clusters of majority-minority districts concentrated around Detroit's downtown, the new maps spread out those votes across simpler districts that mix urban and suburban voters, a blend that experts say creates a more competitive environment for both parties.
So are these maps better from partisan fairness? Yes. Could they be better? Absolutely.
Michigan State Senator Adam Ollier is challenging the commission to go back to the drawing board, arguing that spreading out black voters around Detroit will make it potentially more difficult for black candidates to get on the ballot in the first place.
So black candidates, particularly from urban communities and from a rural space, have typically raised less money because there's less money in their districts. And when we talk about how much money has impacted politics, it changes who can run for things and where the elected officials come out of.
On one hand, though they do have a point, because certainly a district that is 44% black is less likely to elect a black representative. But at the same time, kind of because of our system of elections, it's also very likely, I think, that that even a 44% black district would elect a candidate preferred by black voters.
Former President Barack Obama and former Attorney General Eric Holder have both endorsed Michigan's maps, but many here say the debate around Detroit doesn't have an easy answer.
I think at the end of the day, we did our good faith effort to come up with very good maps for the people of the state of Michigan.
I think the problem is people have said, well, nationally, it was either you can draw competitive districts or draw black districts. You can draw both.
The courts will decide the fate of Michigan's new maps, and it's the voters in November's midterm elections that will put them to their first big test.
What will you look for to say, yeah, those maps actually worked? It actually was fair and more competitive.
If our election maps are actually responsive, that when voters want to elect Democrats, they can, and when voters want to elect Republicans, they can. This is just one small step to start taking that power back and evening the playing field for voters to be able to actually control our elections and get the results we want.
All right, thanks to Devin Dwyer for that report. And thank you all for joining us. I'm Diane Macedo. ABC News Live continues with news, context, and analysis. Stay with us.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.